lawless Department of Justice and the most politically weaponized Department of Justice our nation has ever seen. We just heard the senator from Rhode Island talk about the imperative of protecting judges. And yet not a single Democrat senator cared about the violent protesters
who get to have children out of wedlock. We don't get to have those kind of conversations. The conversations we get to have is how we are responsible for fully funding our schools so all of our children have the opportunities we have as we sit.
All right, everyone, brace yourselves. This isn't just politics. It's philosophy colliding with power. Senator Ted Cruz enters with his trademark precision, armed with data, conviction, and the sharp edge of legal mastery. Across the chamber, Ilhan Omar stands unshaken, ready to defend her vision of America's soul. The atmosphere crackles, flashes pop, eyes lock, and every word feels volatile. As Cruz begins his assault on what he calls a lawless Department of Justice, Omar's gaze never wavers. Calm, fiery, resolute. This isn't a debate. It's a collision between order and empathy, between the letter of the law and the pulse of humanity.
Justice and the most politically weaponized Department of Justice our nation has ever seen. We just heard the senator from Rhode Island talk about the imperative of protecting judges. And yet not a single Democrat senator cared about the violent protesters that showed up outside Supreme Court justices' homes, including, I might note, female justices like Justice Amy Coney Barrett, threatening their family, and Joe Biden's attorney general didn't do a damn thing and refused to enforce the law to protect those judges. Why? Because he agreed with the violent protesters and he wanted to intimidate and threaten those judges. Professor Bray, under our Constitution, who should decide elections, the voters or unelected judges?
The voters are the ones who should vote in the election according to the laws, and the laws sometimes have to be applied by the judges if they're...
And under our Constitution, who is charged with making policy decisions? Elected representatives elected by the people or unelected federal judges?
I think the question of policy, Senator, is a little broader than the particular case. So the laws should be enacted by Congress. That's where the fountain of law...
Policy decisions are the elected branch.
Right.
Law is the province of the court. Policy is the province of the elected branches. These are not complicated. Professor Bray, let me ask you this. Do the federal courts have power to issue remedies for people who are not parties to a case?
Cruz wastes no breath. He strikes fast, condemning the Justice Department as a weapon of politics, a threat to democracy itself. His tone sharpens as he calls out Democrats for their silence when mobs gathered outside the homes of Supreme Court justices, including Amy Coney Barrett. Every word lands like a blade, pointed straight at Ilhan Omar and her allies. But Omar doesn't flinch. Her composure is deliberate, her silence powerful. Cruz's message reverberates through the hall. In his eyes, the left no longer defends the law, they distort it. And across the table, Omar waits, her calm the prelude to fire.
That's a question I agree is not complicated. They do not have that power.
Is the phrase nationwide injunction or universal injunction found anywhere in the Constitution?
It is not.
First chart. In the first 150 years of our republic, how many nationwide injunctions were issued?
My view is that there were not any until 1963.
0. Now fast forward. How many nationwide injunctions were issued in the entire 20th century?
It's a small number. I would think it would be a dozen, give or take. It's not large.
27, actually. Excluding Trump's first term, how many nationwide injunctions were issued in the last 20 years?
Far more than that.
32. From 2001 to 2024 against Biden, Obama, and Bush, 32.
Now Cruz shifts his approach. The chamber becomes a courtroom of ideas. Every question he asks carries weight. Deliberate, surgical. Who decides elections? He demands. The voters, or unelected judges. His delivery is cool, confident, calculated. Ilhan Omar listens, still and unflinching, as Cruz builds his case piece by piece. It's the people, he declares, not the courts. Then he pushes further, unveiling a record of judicial overreach. decades with no nationwide injunctions against conservatives, then 37 against Donald Trump in just 2 months. The numbers hit like a drumbeat. The room tightens. The tension thickens. Omar's resolve hardens. Law, ideology, and belief converge, a storm brewing beneath polished words.
And how many nationwide injunctions have been issued in the last 2 months alone?
There have been quite a few.
37. Let that sink in. There have been no more nationwide injunctions in the past 2 months against President Trump than in the entire 20th century. There have been more nationwide injunctions against President Trump in the last 2 months than both terms of George W. Bush, both terms of Barack Obama, and Joe Biden's term. We saw during the Biden presidency lawfare, indicting President Trump 4 times, using the machinery of justice to attack him, and that was an attack on democracy, because Democrats today hate democracy. Democrats today are angry at the voters for re-electing Donald Trump and electing a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and they engaged in lawfare to stop democracy from operating.
Then, Ilhan Omar rises. Her presence shifts the entire room. Her tone is steady, her words precise, but their impact devastating. She doesn't counter with charts or statistics. She cuts deeper. You speak of law and order, she begins. But what about justice? For the poor, the hungry, the forgotten? Her voice transforms the chamber from courtroom to confessional. She recounts fragments of her past. A refugee without water, without a bed, without certainty. Not for sympathy, but for truth. For every chart Cruz brandishes, Omar responds with lived experience, unquantifiable, undeniable. Her words aren't written in ink but carved in survival. A moral reckoning that commands the nation to see, to feel, to answer. 5.
The mold to stop poisoning your children in the classrooms. The other thing that frustrates me is people who have experienced poverty, who have gotten the straps for their bootstraps, who sit and talk about how we shouldn't do anything for the next person. See, as someone who knows severe poverty, I lived in a refugee camp, on the floor, no water, nothing. And I hear somebody say here in the United States, they're fine with their grandparents not having running water? And that's supposed to be okay? Or we hear someone say, it was a choice made up to me to have my children and not be like the other black people who get to have children out of wedlock.
The confrontation turns raw. Cruz fires back, branding his opponents as practitioners of lawfare, using the law to silence dissent. His accusation lands like a hammer, and its shadow falls squarely on Ilhan Omar. But she doesn't take the bait. Instead, she meets his fury with silence, deliberate, poised, unyielding. The chamber holds its breath. Her stillness becomes its own statement, echoing louder than rebuttal. In that silence, she embodies the millions unseen, those who live outside the walls of privilege, beyond the reach of comfort. Cruz's law becomes a wall. Omar's truth, a doorway. Principle stands against empathy. Order against humanity. And the air trembles under the weight of conviction.
We don't get to have those kind of conversations. The conversations we get to have is how we are responsible for fully funding our schools so all of our children have the opportunities we have as we sit in this room. We get to talk about the kind of opportunities we have as government to make sure healthcare is provided to everybody so that we don't have people dying in the United States because they can't afford insulin. The conversation we get to have is making sure that there are no children going to sleep hungry or being shamed in classrooms and in lunchrooms because their families don't have enough money to pay for their lunch. The conversation we get to have about the kind of poverty we have in this country is the kind of poverty that says it is okay for us to take photo pictures with veterans and be okay with the fact that they're sleeping on the streets here in the United States.
When Ilhan Omar speaks again, her words carry the weight of lived reality. Her tone soft but cutting, her message impossible to ignore. She paints America in haunting detail: veterans sleeping on sidewalks, children hungry in classrooms, grandparents living without water or light. Her testimony isn't political theater, it's truth. She forces the chamber to face its contradiction: a country that preaches compassion abroad while neglecting its own at home. Her words become a mirror: pride against pain, rhetoric against reality. Every line lands like a verdict. And in that moment, the chamber ceases to be a debate floor. It becomes a witness stand. Ilhan Omar is no longer arguing. She's testifying before history itself.
So as an immigrant, as someone who came to this country, hearing about American exceptionalism and prosperity, I am appalled that we get to sit here and have conversations as Americans about being the most charitable country in the world and not being charitable enough to house our homeless, feed our children, care for our veterans.
For the first time, Cruz falters. The rhythm that once defined him breaks. A silence falls. Heavy. Alive. Even his critics feel it. What Omar delivers isn't politics. It's revelation. She turns toward the audience, eyes unwavering, and asks, how can a nation so rich in pride be so poor in compassion? How can it fund wars abroad while its children starve at home? The question slices through the noise. No one answers. Not because they can't, but because they shouldn't have to. The senator who entered armed with facts and figures now faces a truth that defies logic. A power that cannot be measured, only felt.
Is charitable about that? So I ask you, the kind of systematic barriers that exist in prosperity, that's the conversation we should be having. And so I want you guys to, for the little bit of time that I have, to talk about the systematic barriers that exist in creating prosperity and what it means for us to remove those so that all of us could have the prosperity that is guaranteed within.
As the session closes, Ilhan Omar's words linger, smoke that refuses to clear. They drift beyond the walls, carried into a country still searching for its soul. Ted Cruz may have won on technicalities, statutes, precedents, the machinery of law, but Omar's truth struck deeper. It spoke to the conscience of a nation divided between justice and judgment, compassion and control. When she asks, what is charitable about turning our backs on our own people? No one dares to respond. The silence becomes its own testimony. Two visions stood here, unyielding, absolute. And for once, victory wasn't defined by who spoke the loudest, but by who spoke to the heart of a fractured America.